Imagine that you're sitting in a linear algebra class and the professor just explained a wonderful formula that you can use in the upcoming open book exam, for which you are allowed to have 1 page of notes during the exam. But the catch is that you only have 20 minutes to answer 50 questions. So you very smartly write down this formula in your notes because you are sure that you will use it again to rapidly answer question during the exam. Sure enough, on the day of the exam, you use that very same formula to answer multiple questions quickly without doing much work at all. This analogy is an example of memoization in computer science because you are storing an otherwise time-consuming mathematical calculation onto your notes so that you can use it again quickly. But instead of paper notes, we store the memoize function or memoize value in a data structure like a cache so that we can use it as many times as we need to without having to use much computing power. I actually covered the subject of memoization in May of 2019 in my Replace Lodash with Vanilla JavaScript video, where I use a Game of Thrones analogy of preparing for the Battle of Winterfell against the White Walkers. Specifically, caching wildfire in strategic locations within this structure so that it can be used quickly. At that time, I offer this vanilla JavaScript function if you wanted to memoize a function without using any external libraries. Similarly, if you wanted to memoize a value, then it would be this vanilla JavaScript function. Both functions, of course, are still valid if you wanted to use vanilla JavaScript or TypeScript. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the React.memo function and the useMemo hook to implement memoization in a React application so that we can efficiently search for products in an online department store. Let's go back to the documentation for the React memo function, which is a React higher order component, which takes a component as its argument and then return a new component with enhanced functionality or shared logic. You might have noticed the note about the experimental React compiler, which at the time of this recording is still in beta. The note also appears in the useMemo hook documentation. The React compiler does look very promising, but I have to remind you again that at this point it is still in the experimental phase. It is not ready for production level applications. I made a couple of slides for you as to why the React compiler isn't ready for production just yet, and why we still need to use the React memo higher order component and the use memo hook. You can pause the video to read the slides if you want. Even the React documentation itself suggests an incremental adoption approach to the React compiler. This is the non-memoized version of the department store application. The products in the store are being fetched from the dummy JSON API, from the products endpoint. And I am using TanStack Query to fetch data from that endpoint. Directing your attention to the timestamp at the bottom of each of these product card. The application is fetching 101 products from the API. Now watch what happens to the timestamp as I start to type. See how it changes on each keystroke? That is because every time I type something, all 101 cards are being re-rendered. If the number of products were to increase, you can imagine how slow and how inefficient the search would be. And yes, it is really 3 a.m. where I currently am. I guess I'm a night owl or a morning owl, as it were. I would like to take this opportunity to ask you to please subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost you anything. It is completely free and it will help me grow this channel going forward. If you like this tutorial, please consider giving this video a thumbs up. Thank you. If you are not familiar with TanStack Query, I have multiple tutorial videos for TanStack Query here on YouTube for free. Now, I want to emphasize something that's often misunderstood. Memoization, whether it be React or Vue or Angular or any other library or framework, memoization does not fix your API latency or speed or lack of speed. Memoization will not improve network latency. Data still travels at the same speed over the internet. Memoization cannot control the speed at which your data flows through the internet. The API response and network latency has to do with your backend and the internet infrastructure that delivers the data from your backend to the client over the internet. Again, memoization has absolutely nothing to do with that. I'm harping on this point because I'm still hearing from experienced people that somehow they think that memoization can somehow magically improve their internet speed or their server speed. That's not the case at all. Memoization acts on the data after it has been received in the client. And just to get ahead of myself just a little bit, what the useMemo hook does is it cache expensive computations in the browser or the client. It prevents unnecessary recalculation of filter or sorted data. It optimizes rendering performance by avoiding redundant work, and it saves on CPU cycles on the user's device, which may be a high power Mac or a low power PC. At the heart of the applications are two components: the product list, which handles API communication with the endpoint. It also handles product search. Now, to be clear, this product search is not searching the database for certain products through the API. It is searching through all 101 products that has already been fetched from the API and is currently residing in the TanStack query cache. Here's what I mean. We've successfully fetched products from the API. When we are typing in this search field, we are actually filtering out the products from all of the products that we have already fetched from the API. The function to filter the products is located here. As you can see, it's a pretty straightforward JavaScript array filter function with some text manipulation for consistency in the text. A quick note on the trim function to trim white space in the leading and trailing edge of the search term. I often get asked why. Aside from the obvious, sometimes when people are using a mobile device, mobile web, when they use their finger to tap into the input box, sometimes that can lead to adding a white space on some devices. So calling trim helps to ensure we get rid of that white space. If you recall from earlier in the video when I show you the vanilla JavaScript memorize function that I wrote back in 2019, well, this function here is a perfect candidate to pass as an argument to that function. But luckily, in React, we have a pre-built useMemo hook that we can use without having to write our own custom code. If we don't memorize this function, then it will get called on every keystroke as I demonstrated earlier in the video. But before we implement that, let's visit the product's card component. This component obviously is to render the individual product, but it also takes a product prop. I mentioned the product prop because when the parent component of the product card component, in this case product list, passes data down to the child component, which is the case with all React application, this also causes a re-render. Therefore, this product's card component is the perfect candidate for us to wrap the memo higher order function around so that we can prevent re-renders when the prop haven't changed. Now, I do want to let you know that I have created a GitHub repository for you with the completed code. The link will be in the video description. Refactoring the product card is very easy. First, import the memo higher order component from React, and then we wrapped the component with memo, like so. That's it. And with respect to the useMemo hook, make sure you import that from React. And then I'm going to rename this function to filter products. I'll comment that out. Then I'll wrap this function in parens. I'll add the hook. The call signature for useMemo is a function and a dependency array with values that will fire on change. That in my case would be data and search term. I haven't changed the text in the comments, but let's go ahead and test this out in the browser. We can ignore all of the text up here. We have applied memoization to this application. So let's test for soft drink. As you can see here, the time did not change at all. And if you're wondering about the time difference, a huge thunderstorm came through here and knocked out the power. So I had to stop recording for a few hours until power was restored. Now, one thing that I also need to explain to you is that earlier when I said that when this prop, when the product prop does not change, we do not want the component to re-render. However, if the end user was retyping a different product, then we do want this component to re-render, right? Because at this point, the end user is searching for another product. So in that case, we do want this to re-render. Okay, that's normal behavior. So I want to make that clear. So here's what I mean. Let's say I'm searching for steak. And then I thought, oh, just kidding. I'm actually looking for strawberries. So in that case, I actually do want to re-render so I can find strawberries instead. And then here I have the memoized and non-memoized side by side. Just to test it one more time, you guys have already seen this. Okay, strawberries. All right. And then the other side. Now watch the timestamp. See, it's changing. That's not good. This is not what we want. So this good version, the memoized version is what I have pushed up to the GitHub repository for you guys. So certainly the star of this tutorial is the React memo higher order component and the useMemo hook. But I also have to give credit to TanStack Query, which makes this process a whole lot easier. Can you do this without TanStack Query? Absolutely. But certainly from my perspective, using TanStack for this makes it very, very convenient. Just some general housekeeping here. So in the final version of the app, I changed the fetch. I changed the query param to only select title, description, price, brand, category, and thumbnail. And that matches the types that I declare, and it also makes the fetch a little bit more concise so that we don't bring back stuff that we don't need. It's not quite GraphQL, but it's quasi GraphQL, but we're still REST here. And another frequent question that I get asked about PNPM is that unlike NPM, you do not have to issue the command npm run dev or build or lint or whatever. In PNPM, in my case, I've aliased just pn. You can just run pn dev and it'll do its thing or whatever command you have set up here. So it's a little bit more concise. And then as a final reminder, the React compiler, which can potentially one day replace the memo high order component and the use memo hook. But for now, it's still experimental. And even in the docs, even in the official docs, they say to adapt it incrementally and obviously not in production, right? Okay, my dear friends, I hope you had some fun. I hope this was entertaining and I hope you learned something from this. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing to my channel. Again, it's completely free. It doesn't cost you anything. Please give this video a thumbs up. Again, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.